Last night's episode of Jimmy Kimmel Live didn't just stir up public opinion. It was like a blaze igniting, torching all expectations and turning the stage into a battlefield of truth. What started as a routine political interview, a predictable dance between a late-night host and a White House representative, quickly erupted into the most dramatic showdown in late-night television history, leaving an indelible mark on the landscape of media and politics. The air in the studio crackled with an unspoken tension, a premonition of the seismic shift about to occur. Under the glaring stage lights, the audience roared as if the very room might burst. Applause mixed with boos, cheers, and scattered jeers, creating a chaotic symphony that vibrated through the very bones of the building. This was no ordinary crowd. It was a microcosm of a nation divided, each faction poised to champion their champion or condemn their opponent. And into this charged arena stepped Karoline Leavitt, the youngest White House press secretary in history. Her entrance wasn't merely walking onto a stage, it was an arrival, a declaration. She moved with a razor-sharp presence, her blonde hair catching the light like a halo of defiance, her steel-bright eyes commanding attention, cutting through the cacophony. Her red suit blazed under the studio lights, a defiant flame against the cool, calculated humor of late night. It wasn't just an outfit. It was a declaration, declaring she wasn't there to back down, not an inch. Across from her, behind his polished desk, stood Jimmy Kimmel, the undisputed king of late-night TV. His signature smile, a well-practiced mask, hid his intent to turn this interview into a peak performance of satire, a comedic dissection of political talking points. He was the hunter, and the stage was his meticulously prepared trap. The audience, a volatile entity, was divided from the start. One corner of the studio chanted slogans supporting the president, their voices a fervent chorus of allegiance, while the other cheered Kimmel with raucous laughter, eager for the comedic takedown they anticipated. The camera panned slowly across Leavitt's face, unwavering, exuding an icy confidence that seemed to defy the very concept of stage fright. Kimmel stood behind his desk, his black suit sleek, his eyes glinting like a hunter ready to cast his net. As the show's opening music faded, the stage lights zeroed in on the center, highlighting the impending confrontation. Kimmel's smile was radiant, a beacon of his usual charm, but his eyes were sharp as a blade, betraying the predatory glint of a seasoned performer preparing to strike. "Welcome to an evening full of surprises," he began, his tone smooth, almost silken, but laced with an unmistakable sarcasm that dripped like venom. The audience roared with laughter, some whistling, others clapping, as Kimmel tossed out his first jab. "Tonight we have a guest from the White House. Hope she brought a map to navigate my questions." The crowd erupted again, a wave of mirth washing over the studio. But at the edge of the stage, Karoline Leavitt sat motionless, her lips curling into a confident, almost knowing smile, as if she'd heard these lines 1,000 times before, and they held no power over her. The battlefield was set, the first shot fired, and the warrior of truth was ready. With the battlefield unveiled and the first sarcastic volley fired, Karoline Leavitt didn't merely react, she advanced. From her seated position at the edge of the stage, she stood with an unhurried grace, her movements imbued with a steady poise that spoke volumes. Her red suit, already a blazing declaration, seemed to ignite further under the intense studio lights as she strode deliberately to the guest chair. This was no hesitant approach. It was a confident march, a warrior claiming her ground. She met Jimmy Kimmel's outstretched hand, not with a polite formality, but with a brief but firm grip, a silent assertion of equal footing. Then, with a fluid motion, she sat, legs crossed neatly, her gaze never once leaving her opponent. The audience, sensing the shift from comedic banter to something far more profound, fell silent, a collective breath held, feeling the palpable heat of this silent, escalating showdown. Kimmel, ever the showman, leaned in, his hands resting on his desk, his posture still outwardly relaxed. His tone remained light, almost conversational, yet it was loaded with an unmistakable intent, a hidden blade beneath a velvet glove. "Karoline, welcome to the show," he began, his voice dripping with feigned cordiality. "What's it like being the face of the White House, or should I say the cleanup crew for the president's tweet storms?" Laughter erupted from the audience, a wave of familiar derisive mirth that usually signaled the host's triumph. It was a well-aimed jab designed to elicit a flustered defense, a moment of weakness. But Leavitt didn't flinch, not a muscle in. Her face betrayed surprise or discomfort. Instead, she offered a confident smile, a subtle curl of her lips that seemed to acknowledge the jab and dismiss its power simultaneously. Her voice, when it came, was clear and sharp as a blade, cutting through the lingering chuckles. "What's it like?" she echoed, the question hanging in the air for a beat. "I'm proud, Jimmy. Proud to represent millions of Americans, not the people sitting here twisting the truth for laughs." The studio fell quiet, the laughter abruptly extinguished, replaced by a stunned silence broken only by scattered tentative applause from her burgeoning supporters in the crowd. Kimmel, for the briefest second, raised an eyebrow, his signature smile faltering, a flicker of genuine surprise crossing his features before he swiftly regained his composure. "Oh, coming in strong," he quipped, attempting to recover his footing. "I like that," he pressed on, trying to steer the narrative back to his comedic comfort zone. "But honestly, don't you ever feel like your job is a bit like doing comedy?" Leavitt tilted her head, her steel-bright eyes gleaming, reflecting the stage lights like polished steel. "Comedy?" she countered, her voice laced with a cool, dismissive wit. "No, Jimmy. I leave that to you. I'm here to say what needs to be." He said, not to perform tricks for the audience. Another wave of applause broke out, louder this time, more confident, forcing Kimmel to raise a hand, a gesture of surrender to the crowd's unexpected enthusiasm. The camera zoomed in on his face, still smiling, but the subtle flicker of tension in his eyes was undeniable. He was losing control of the narrative, a rare and unsettling experience for the king of late night. Leavitt, meanwhile, sat upright, her gaze locked on Kimmel like a gladiator who'd drawn her sword, poised and ready for the next strike. The stage lights, already burning bright, seemed to intensify, casting an almost ethereal glow around her. Jimmy Kimmel leaned forward, his smile still rigidly in place, but his eyes sharpened, no longer merely glinting, but narrowing with the focused intensity of a card player about to play his ace, desperate to regain the upper hand. The clash of ideologies had begun in earnest. The air in the studio, already thick with tension, tightened further as Jimmy Kimmel, his smile still a rigid facade, leaned forward. He was no longer attempting light-hearted jabs. The glint in his eyes had sharpened, revealing the desperation of a player about to lay down his supposed ace. "Karoline, you say you represent Americans," he began, his tone now lighter, almost conversational, but loaded with a subtext as heavy as lead. "But when the president's policies drive up prices, how do you explain that to the people struggling out there?" The question landed not as a joke, but as a genuine challenge, a calculated shift from jest to direct policy critique. The audience waited in a collective silence, some whispering to each other, sensing the pivotal moment, the true battleground of this unprecedented showdown. Karoline Leavitt, however, remained utterly unperturbed. She sat upright, her hands resting lightly on her lap, a picture of serene confidence. Her eyes, sharp as a blade, locked onto Kimmel as if he were the only target in her sights, the sole obstacle in her path to delivering the truth. "Jimmy, rising prices are a global issue, not just in America," she replied, her voice calm, utterly devoid of defensiveness, yet cutting like a polished blade. We're protecting jobs, shielding our economy from foreign dependence. Have you ever talked about the millions who kept their jobs because of our policies? Or do you just pick numbers that make your audience laugh? A section of the audience, her loyal and growing legion of supporters, erupted in applause, cheers rising like a tide, momentarily drowning out any dissent. Kimmel shifted in his seat, visibly uncomfortable, trying to interject with a quip, a desperate attempt to regain his comedic footing. "Oh, I love numbers," he retorted, forcing a laugh, "especially when they crash like the stock market." Laughter rang out, but it was weaker than expected, a scattered, hesitant sound that quickly died. Leavitt didn't let him stretch the moment, didn't allow the comedic interjection to derail her momentum. "Market fluctuations are normal, Jimmy," she continued, her voice resonant, powerful, effortlessly drowning out the scattered chuckles. "But you know what's not normal? People like you spending entire shows twisting the truth instead of asking real questions." The studio split again, a seismic wave of sound. Some audience members stood to clap, their cheers echoing like thunder, while others booed, creating a chaotic, deafening roar. Kimmel raised a hand, a futile gesture to calm the tempest he had unleashed, but his eyes betrayed a hint of genuine unease, a flicker of panic. "Real questions, huh?" he shot back, his tone now sharper, tinged with a nascent bitterness. "Fine. How do you explain the president constantly making claims that are, let's say, hard to verify, to be polite?" Leavitt's smile, a cold but confident grin, widened slightly. "Polite? That's a new word for you, isn't it?" she said, drawing laughs from a few audience members, this time at her wit, not Kimmel's. "I'm not here to play word games, Jimmy. The president says what he believes, and I clarify what needs clarifying. But if you want to talk about hard to verify, why not address how your show edits words to turn everything into a punchline?" The stage shook with applause, louder than ever before, a veritable storm that forced Kimmel to pause, to visibly struggle to regain his rhythm. The camera caught his face, still smiling, but his lips tightened, a telltale sign of his mounting frustration. Not giving Kimmel a chance to respond, Leavitt pressed her advantage, turning slightly to the audience, her voice like a sword slicing through the air, cutting through the lingering tension. "Folks, I know you came here for fun, but you deserve more than cheap jokes. You deserve to hear the truth about our country, about what we're doing, about what really matters." The crowd erupted, many standing, chanting, "Karoline, Karoline!" A powerful, unified roar. Kimmel tried to cut in, his voice strained. "Hey, this is a comedy show, not a political forum." But his words were utterly drowned out by the crowd's overwhelming noise. Leavitt looked straight at him, her gaze piercing, unwavering. "If this is just comedy, why are you scared when I speak the truth?" The question hung in the air, a final, undeniable blow, leaving Kimmel visibly reeling as the battle for the narrative raged on. The question hung in the electrified air, a final, undeniable blow that left Kimmel visibly reeling. "If this is just comedy, why are you scared when I speak the truth?" He had no answer, only a tightening of his lips, a forced smile that was now a pale, desperate shadow of its former self. The studio, a tempest of cheers and boos, seemed to vibrate with the raw energy of a battle decisively turning. Kimmel, the master of this domain, found himself utterly disarmed, his usual quick wit failing him in the face of Leavitt's relentless assault of truth. He tried to gather himself, to formulate a response, but the moment had slipped irrevocably from his grasp. Not giving Kimmel a single chance to recover, Leavitt pressed her advantage, her gaze still piercing, but now sweeping across the audience, drawing them into her orbit. Her voice, like a sword slicing through the air, cut through the lingering tension and the chaotic din. "Folks, I know you came here for fun, but you deserve more than cheap jokes. You deserve to hear the truth about our country, about what we're doing, about what really matters. The crowd erupted, a tidal wave of sound. Many stood, their cheers coalescing into a unified, powerful chant, "Karoline, Karoline, Karoline!" It was a roar of affirmation, a collective acknowledgement that something profound was unfolding before their eyes. Kimmel, desperate, tried to cut in, his voice strained and thin against the overwhelming noise. "Hey, this is a comedy show, not a political forum." But his words were utterly drowned out, swallowed by the fervent acclaim for Leavitt. She looked straight at him, her gaze unwavering, a silent, triumphant declaration. The battle was won, the narrative seized. Kimmel, his face a mask of barely contained frustration, leaned closer, his tone now tinged with a raw, bitter desperation. "Truth? You talk about truth when the whole country sees you standing behind, someone who's made everything a mess. Don't you get tired of covering for him every day?" The question landed like a bomb, designed to shatter her composure, to expose a crack in her armor. The audience held its breath, awaiting Leavitt's response. The studio momentarily silent save for the rapid beating of collective hearts. But Leavitt didn't blink, didn't waver. She only smiled faintly, a confident, almost pitying curve of her lips before replying. "Covering?" she echoed, the word dripping with disdain. "I'm not covering anything, Jimmy. I'm standing up for the people you and your kind ignore, the workers, the families, the people who believe in this country. What about you? What do you stand for besides laughs and ratings?" The stage felt like it was on fire. The audience clapped fiercely, some shouting in support, shaking the studio with their fervor. Kimmel tried to keep his smile, but his eyes showed clear discomfort, a flash of genuine fear. "You're good, Karoline," he said, his tone reluctant, a grudging admission of defeat. "But if you're so confident, why not answer straight? Do you really believe the president is doing a good job? Or is that just your job talking?" Leavitt tilted, her head, her eyes never leaving Kimmel's, and answered instantly, her voice ringing with conviction. "I believe in what we're doing, building a stronger America. What about you, Jimmy? Do you believe in what you say every night, or are you just reading a script for a paycheck?" The applause roared again like thunder, drowning out Kimmel as he tried to interject, his voice lost in the triumphant clamor. The camera zoomed in on Leavitt's face. There was no trace of fear, only absolute, radiant confidence. Kimmel's eyes began to waver, his defeat now palpable. All right, he said, his voice straining to stay cheerful, a desperate attempt to salvage what little dignity remained. "You want to play? Let's see how you handle this." He signaled his team, and a large screen behind him lit up, ready to play a clip from one of Leavitt's White House press briefings. The footage showed her at the podium, slightly hesitant, while addressing the impact of tariffs, cleverly edited to highlight her moment of unease. A reporter in the clip smirked, and the video froze, just as Leavitt seemed at a loss for words. The audience erupted in laughter, spurred on by Jimmy Kimmel, who raised his hand like a gladiator landing a critical blow. "Karoline, is this the truth you're talking about?" he asked, his tone triumphant, believing he had finally landed the knockout punch. "Looks like you were scrambling when a reporter asked about prices spiking 15% because of the president's tariffs." Karoline Leavitt sat upright, her eyes sharp as a blade, locking onto Kimmel, as if he'd just walked into her trap. "That's disappointing, Jimmy," she replied, her voice slow but cutting, resonating through the studio. "You had to dig for hours to find 5 seconds of me pausing, but you didn't dare show the other 10 minutes of that briefing where I gave the numbers. Tariffs created 2.3 million manufacturing jobs last year, per the Department of Labor's report. Want me to repeat that figure?" A section of the audience exploded in applause, cheers drowning out the scattered laughter. Kimmel raised an eyebrow, his smile faltering, but he pressed on. "Jobs. You know, Americans are paying 20% more for imported goods because of that policy. Is that your truth too?" Leavitt smiled, a cold but confident grin. "You love numbers, don't you?" she said, her voice slicing like a knife. "So let's talk about this one. Before tariffs, we imported 60% of our steel from China, costing 500,000 American steel jobs from 2000 to 2015, according to the International Economic Institute. Now, thanks to our policies, domestic steel production is up 25%. That's why I'm here, Jimmy, to defend the workers you never mention in your jokes." The studio shook with applause, so strong that Kimmel had to raise a hand to quiet the crowd. The camera panned to his face, his smile held, but his grip on his pen tightened, his eyes betraying a hint of panic. Kimmel tried to regain control, his tone now laced with bitterness. "You're good with numbers, Karoline, but you can't deny your administration is making a mess of things. Do you ever wonder which side you're on when the world laughs at what the president says?" The question landed like a bomb, and the audience held its breath. Leavitt didn't blink, her gaze piercing Kimmel, laughing. "The world laughed at us when we lost millions of jobs to terrible trade deals. I stand with the Americans who've been forgotten. The workers in Ohio, Michigan, Pennsylvania. Who do you stand with, Jimmy? Besides the audience laughing at your script?" The crowd erupted, chants of "Karoline" echoing through the studio, many standing to cheer. Kimmel tried to interject. "This is a show, not a campaign rally." But his voice was drowned out by the crowd's noise. Leavitt turned to the audience, her voice powerful like a call to arms. "Folks, I know you came here for fun, but you deserve more than cheap jokes. You deserve to know about the people fighting to bring jobs back, to secure our borders, to build a stronger America. That's the truth I bring here, no matter how he tries to twist it." The applause roared like thunder, overwhelming Kimmel's attempts to regain the mood. Kimmel leaned in, his voice now tinged with desperation. "Truth? You call defending someone who constantly makes false claims truth? Don't you get tired of performing every day?" Leavitt tilted her head, her smile now defiant. "Performing? I face dozens of reporters daily, answering the toughest questions with no script, no editing. Team to save me like you. What about you, Jimmy? Are you tired of playing the smart guy every night, or is that just the job?" The audience erupted again, laughter now aimed at Kimmel, forcing him to pause to catch his breath. Not giving Kimmel a chance to recover, Leavitt pressed on, her voice like a final sword strike. "You want to talk about falsehoods? Let's talk about how you edit words, twist the truth to make everything a joke. You don't care about Americans, you care about ratings. I'm here to defend the people you ignore, and I won't let you turn that into a punchline." Kimmel tried to cut in. "You're turning my show into a political forum, Karoline." But Leavitt interrupted, her eyes blazing. "No, Jimmy, I'm turning it into a place where the truth is spoken. And if that scares you, maybe you should change careers." The stage felt like it was ablaze. The audience stood in greater numbers, their cheers like a tidal wave, sweeping away Kimmel's every effort. She turned to the audience once more, her voice resounding. "Don't let people like him decide what you think. You're smarter than that. You're stronger than that. And we, the people working for you, won't stop, no matter how many jokes we face." The applause became a storm, many standing, chanting her name, while Kimmel sat there, his smile now a pale shadow. Kimmel tried to salvage the moment. "Wow, Karoline, you sure know how to heat up the stage." But his voice was lost in the crowd's noise. Leavitt looked at him, her gaze that of someone who'd won decisively. "I'm not done yet, Jimmy," she said, her voice soft but sharp as a blade. "But I'll give you a chance to rethink before we go on." The camera zoomed in on her face. No fear, only radiant confidence. Kimmel raised a hand, trying to quiet the audience. "We'll be back after the break," he said, his voice straining to sound upbeat, but the studio still shook with cheers for Leavitt. The stage returned after the commercial break, still trembling with thunderous applause for Karoline Leavitt, who had turned the interview into a battlefield where she held the upper hand. Jimmy Kimmel, though still sporting his signature smile, was clearly losing control. His hands gripped the edge of the desk, his eyes wavering as he tried to reclaim the atmosphere. The audience, now like a sea of people swept up in a frenzy, kept standing, chanting, "Karoline, Karoline," while the stage light shone directly on Leavitt, making her red suit glow like an unquenchable flame. She sat there, her gaze icy, unshaken, like a warrior who knew she had won but was still ready. Kimmel leaned forward, his tone now a mix of desperation and bitterness. "Karoline, you talk about truth, but the whole country sees you standing behind someone who's thrown the economy into chaos. Gas prices up 30%, inflation hitting 8% in the past year, according to the Bureau of Labor Statistics. You call that a building?" The question was like a final arrow aimed straight at Leavitt, hoping to make her falter. The audience held their breath, a few boos mixing with applause, awaiting her response. But Leavitt didn't blink. She smiled, a confident yet razor-sharp grin, and replied instantly, "Jimmy, you love stats when they suit you, don't you? Gas prices are a global issue. Did you know crude oil prices spiked 40% due to Middle East conflicts? But what you won't say is that we've boosted domestic oil production by 15%, creating 300,000 new jobs per the Department of Energy. I call that building. What do you call it when you just sit here whining?" The stage erupted again, applause like a tsunami with many audience members standing, shouting in support. Kimmel tried to interject. "Building? You're defending someone who's made us a laughingstock worldwide." But Leavitt cut him off, her voice resounding, drowning out his words. "Laughingstock? The world laughed at us when we lost millions of jobs to failed policies of the past. I'm here to defend the Americans you ignore, the miners in West Virginia, the factory workers in Indiana. Have you ever mentioned them in your jokes, or do you just laugh at things you don't understand?" The audience went wild. Cheers, shaking the studio. Kimmel, now visibly cornered, tried a final blow. "Karoline, you can say whatever you want, but the country sees you standing behind someone who can't keep promises. Don't you get tired of playing spokesperson for a failure?" The question was like a bomb, and the studio fell silent for a second, all eyes on Leavitt. She stood up slowly, her demeanor calm, but radiating authority, her gaze locked on Kimmel like a final declaration of war. "Failure," she said, her voice booming like thunder. "We've brought millions of jobs back, lowered unemployment to 3.5%, the lowest in 50 years, according to the Bureau of Statistics. Failure is you sitting here throwing stones at people fighting for this country just to get a few cheap laughs." The audience exploded, applause like a tidal wave, many standing, chanting her name. Leavitt turned to the crowd, her eyes blazing, her voice powerful like a speech. "You deserve to know about the people working day and night to build this country, not to hear lies wrapped in laughter. I'm here for you, and I won't let anyone, not even you, Jimmy, stop that." The cheers became a storm, drowning out every other sound in the studio. But Leavitt didn't let him continue. She removed her mic calmly, not rushed, not angry, but as an act of asserting power. "I don't need your stage to speak the truth," she said, looking straight at Kimmel, her gaze sharp as steel. "I came here to represent Americans, but you just want a circus. Thanks, Jimmy, but I'm done." She turned to the audience, raising her hand like a queen addressing the crowd. "Don't let people like him decide what you think. Believe in the truth." The studio erupted, applause and cheers resounding, many standing, shouting "Karoline" like a victory cry. Kimmel tried to slip in a weak joke. "Wow, looks like she didn't like my stage lights." But the scattered laughter from the audience only highlighted his defeat. Leavitt walked off the stage, her stride steady, head held high, the lights following her like a crown. The camera captured the historic moment, the studio chaotic with arguments and cheers. Some audience members raised their phones, recording Leavitt's exit, while Kimmel sat there, his smile now just a pale shadow. As Karoline Leavitt left the stage, the lights still followed her silhouette, her red suit blazing like an unextinguishable fire. The studio continued to shake with applause, mixed with chants of "Karoline" and debates erupting in the crowd. Jimmy Kimmel, sitting behind his desk, forced a strange smile, but his eyes betrayed his disarray. "Well, that was an interesting night," he said, trying to inject humor, but the sparse laughter from the audience couldn't mask the chaotic atmosphere. The camera panned across the crowd, capturing stunned faces, phones raised to record the historic. A moment, and Kimmel gripping his hands as if clinging to what little control remained. "We'll be back after the break," he said, but the studio remained electric, no one paying attention to his closing words. The studio, still trembling with thunderous applause for Karoline Leavitt, was a maelstrom of sound and emotion, even as the stage lights dimmed slightly, signaling the commercial break. She had turned the interview into a battlefield where she held the upper hand, leaving an indelible mark on the very fabric of late-night television. Jimmy Kimmel, though still sporting his signature smile, was clearly losing control. His hands, gripping the edge of the desk, his eyes wavering as he tried desperately to reclaim the atmosphere he had so meticulously cultivated for years. The audience, now like a sea of people swept up in a frenzy, kept standing, chanting, "Karoline, Karoline!" Their voices a powerful, unified roar that drowned out any attempts at order. The stage light, a defiant spotlight, shone directly on the empty space where Leavitt had stood, making her red suit glow like an unquenchable flame in the collective memory. She was gone, yet her presence loomed larger than ever. Kimmel, sitting behind his desk, forced a strange, almost grotesque smile, but his eyes betrayed his utter disarray, a profound shock that reverberated through his entire being. "Well, that was an interesting night," he said, trying to inject humor, a desperate plea for normalcy. But the sparse, scattered laughter from the audience couldn't mask the chaotic atmosphere, the shattered illusion of his control. The camera panned across the crowd, capturing stunned faces, phones raised to record the historic moment, and Kimmel gripping his hands, white-knuckled, as if clinging to what little control remained of his show, his career, his very identity. "We'll be back after the break," he announced, his voice straining to sound upbeat, but the studio remained electric, no one paying attention to his closing words, their minds still replaying Leavitt's defiant exit. Within minutes of Leavitt's exit, social media exploded like a tidal wave, a digital tsunami that swept away all other news. Twitter was flooded with hashtags. "Is Leavitt rules," and Your Kimmel School trended globally, thousands of posts every second dissecting, celebrating and condemning the showdown. One user wrote, "Karoline Leavitt just turned Jimmy Kimmel into a spectator." On his own show, Queen, alongside a clip of Leavitt removing her mic, racking up over 2 million views in just 10 minutes. On TikTok, slow-motion videos of her walking off with her icy gaze spread like wildfire, set to triumphant music, transforming the real-life moment into a Hollywood movie scene. A Gen Z user posted, "She didn't just win, she dominated," with a fire emoji garnering tens of thousands of likes, a testament to her instant, undeniable appeal to a younger, often disengaged generation. Even Instagram, typically filled with fashion posts and curated aesthetics, was overtaken by tributes to Leavitt, with captions like, "This is how you stand up to biased media." Kimmel's loyal supporters tried to push back, their voices quickly drowned out by the overwhelming tide of pro-Leavitt sentiment. One account wrote, "Leavitt just talked without answering anything," but was met with hundreds of replies. She answered with truth, while Kimmel only had jokes. Online forums like Reddit buzzed with a thread on Our Politics drawing over 10,000 comments, calling the showdown the TV battle of the decade. A top comment read, "Leavitt didn't just beat Kimmel, she exposed how entertainment media twists truth for profit." Conservatives on social media hailed her as a beacon of honesty, while many neutral viewers admitted, "I don't support Trump." But Leavitt gave Kimmel a lesson. Mainstream media jumped in fast, scrambling to cover the seismic event. Fox News posted, "In that night, Karoline Leavitt annihilates Jimmy Kimmel on his own turf," quoting her line about forgotten Americans as a victory slogan. Newsmax ran the headline, "Press Secretary Crushes Comedian Truth Triumphs," citing Leavitt's stats, 3.5% unemployment, the lowest in half a century. Meanwhile, left-leaning outlets like CNN grudgingly acknowledged her strength, but downplayed. In writing, Leavitt may have scored points, but she dodged questions about Trump's failures. Even so, the article admitted she turned Kimmel's stage into her own press podium. YouTube exploded with reaction videos from online personalities. A conservative YouTuber with 1 million subscribers posted an analysis. "Leavitt didn't just win. She changed how we see late-night TV. Kimmel wanted drama, but she brought truth." The video hit 500,000 views in hours. Even neutral influencers, usually apolitical, spoke up. "I didn't know who she was before, but Leavitt just made me want to learn more about White House policy." Gen Z, often seen as apathetic, flocked to follow Leavitt on social media, boosting her accounts by 200,000 followers overnight. In the studio, the audience kept arguing as the show cut to commercials. Some held up phones, sharing live clips on Instagram stories with captions like, "I just witnessed history." Others, even those not supporting Leavitt, admitted to friends, "She's tough." Kimmel didn't stand a chance. An older audience member whispered to a neighbor, "It's been a while since I saw someone speak so boldly on TV." The chaos was so intense that studio staff had to step in, asking people to sit, but cheers still erupted whenever Leavitt's name was mentioned. Backstage, Kimmel's team was in a panic. A producer shouted through a headset, "We just let her steal the show." Another whispered, "Ratings will be high, but the cost, it's too steep." Kimmel, still in his host chair, stared at the monitor, his face devoid of a smile. He knew he'd been defeated, not by a seasoned politician, but by a young woman armed with truth and courage. Meanwhile, Leavitt, having left the studio, stepped outside with the demeanor of a victor. She didn't look back, but her eyes said it all. She had turned an entertainment stage into a battlefield and walked away with an invisible crown. The night after the historic showdown on Jimmy Kimmel Live, the stage lights still blazed, but the studio atmosphere had shifted. It was no longer a vibrant arena of comedic banter. It was a ghost of its former self, haunted by the echoes of a battle fought and lost. Jimmy Kimmel stepped out with his familiar smile, but his eyes betrayed a profound tension, a deep-seated unease, as if he were entering a battle he'd already lost, a preemptive surrender. The audience clapped, a sparse, almost obligatory sound, but the cheers lacked fervor, mixed with whispers of Karoline and last night, a constant, nagging reminder of his public humiliation. Kimmel sat down, looked straight into the camera, and tried to regain his footing with a joke, a desperate attempt to conjure normalcy. "Hey everyone, tonight we'll keep it lighter because I'm not sure I can handle another fight." Laughter rang out, weak and scattered, utterly insufficient to dispel the colossal shadow of Karoline Leavitt, who had turned this very stage into a personal battlefield just 24 hours earlier. Kimmel knew he couldn't dodge it. Social media was still ablaze with House Leavitt rules, a wildfire of digital triumph. The clip of her removing her mic now surpassed 10 million views on YouTube, a viral sensation that cemented her legend. Analyses across the internet called him the victim of a young, formidable press secretary. He took a breath, his voice dropping, really serious, stripped of its usual comedic armor. "Last night I had let's call it a lively conversation with Karoline Leavitt. I went too far, and I want to say I respect her strength. She's a formidable opponent. The audience clapped sparsely, a hesitant, almost reluctant sound, but the mood was heavy, thick with the lingering scent of defeat. Kimmel's apology, though, carefully scripted, felt forced, a belated, transparent attempt to salvage his rapidly eroding image. On Twitter, a user wrote, "Kimmel apologizing, too late. Leavitt won by knockout." The post quickly racked up 50,000 likes, reflecting the undeniable sentiment of the crowd. Kimmel had fallen. Meanwhile, at the White House, Karoline Leavitt stepped up to the press briefing podium with more confidence than ever before. Her navy suit exuded calm, a stark contrast to the blazing red of the night before, but her eyes still burned with the same unquenchable fire. The reporters, usually sharp and aggressively competitive, seemed more cautious today, their questions tinged with a newfound respect, as if they too sensed her amplified power after her earth-shattering clash with Kimmel. One opened, "Miss Leavitt, about your showdown with Jimmy Kimmel. Do you regret walking off the stage?" Leavitt smiled, her gaze piercing, unwavering. "Regret? I went there to speak the truth, and I did. I walked off because I don't need stage lights to prove it." The briefing room echoed with rare applause. From a few reporters, an almost unheard-of occurrence in that typically cold, adversarial space. Leavitt's response spread like wildfire. Fox News ran the headline, "Leavitt fires back at Kimmel from White House. Truth doesn't need a stage," quoting her as a symbol of honesty. A Newsmax article praised her, declaring, "In 24 hours, Leavitt turned a comedian into a lesson for all." Of Hollywood, even neutral outlets like USA Today had to admit, Leavitt didn't just beat Kimmel, she redefined how a politician confronts entertainment media. On social media, Leavitt's Twitter account gained 300,000 followers overnight, with thousands of comments from young people. "You're the role model I want to follow," or "Thank you for speaking for us." Leavitt, rarely active online, posted a single powerful tweet, "Thank you for listening to the truth." The post garnered 1 million engagements, cementing her status as a rising star, a political force to be reckoned with. Meanwhile, Kimmel faced heavy fallout. The show's ratings the next night dropped 10% per preliminary Nielsen data, as some viewers turned away, calling him a failed bully. Some sponsors whispered about pulling ads, fearing irreparable damage to the show's image. Backstage, Kimmel's team held an emergency meeting, debating frantically how to handle the escalating crisis. One producer suggested, "No more politicians. Too risky." But Kimmel, though outwardly calm, couldn't hide his profound frustration. An insider revealed he privately told a colleague, "I didn't expect her to be that tough." His apology, though praised by some loyal fans, wasn't enough to quell the tidal wave of criticism. A Variety analysis wrote, "Kimmel wanted a viral moment, but Leavitt took it from him." Leavitt appeared on a Fox News interview that same evening, reinforcing her message, "We're working for Americans, the workers, the families, the people ignored by entertainment media." The quote was cited everywhere, from articles to TikTok videos, turning Leavitt into a symbol of courage and defiance. A college student posted a video analysis, "Leavitt doesn't just talk, she acts. She makes me want to get into politics." The Yasin's video hit 200,000 views, showing her undeniable influence on younger generations. At the White House, Leavitt's colleagues, from senior advisors to junior staff, hailed her as the administration's sharpest weapon. A senior advisor, quoted anonymously, said she didn't just beat Kimmel, she gave the media a lesson. Leavitt, though busy with her demanding work, remained composed, focused. When a reporter asked what she thought of Kimmel's apology, she replied, curtly, her voice ringing with finality, "I don't need an apology. The truth spoke for me." The line spread instantly, printed on T-shirts and memes, solidifying her image as an unbeatable warrior. While Kimmel struggled to regain his footing, Leavitt rose as a political star, a national phenomenon. She didn't just win on Kimmel's stage, she turned it into a launchpad, forcing the nation to take notice, to listen. She became a symbol for those who believe truth can outshine laughter, that courage can defeat sarcasm. Just days after the historic showdown, Leavitt's name transcended the role of White House press secretary, becoming a symbol of courage and truth in a world full of noise and sarcasm. She didn't just defeat Jimmy Kimmel on his own stage. She rewrote the rules, proving that a young woman with fierce conviction could make an entire media industry rethink itself. The media remained obsessed with Leavitt. Fox News called her an unquenchable fire, quoting her line about forgotten Americans as a rallying cry for a new generation. A Wall Street Journal analysis wrote, Karoline Leavitt didn't just beat Kimmel, she exposed the rift between entertainment media and reality, forcing us to ask, what are we laughing at? Even left-leaning outlets like MSNBC, though reluctant, admitted Leavitt turned a comedy show into a soapbox, a feat few could pull off. She became a topic in college lectures where students analyzed how she used language and confidence to shape public opinion. Social media never stopped talking about Leavitt. The Donna Leavitt rules stayed trending on Twitter for a week with over 5 million related posts. A TikTok video from a young woman mimicking Leavitt's walk and voice as she removed her mic hit 3 million views, captioned, "Learn to stand up like Karoline." Memes of her flooded Instagram, from images of her staring down Kimmel with an icy gaze to her quote, "Truth doesn't need a stage," printed on mugs and t-shirts. One user wrote, "Leavitt is proof. You don't need to shout to be heard, you just need to speak right." The post drew 100,000 likes, reflecting her influence across all ages. In a Newsmax interview, Leavitt emphasized, "I didn't fight Kimmel for personal reasons. I fought for the Americans who don't have a voice on late-night TV." The line was quoted everywhere, becoming a banner for those who felt ignored by the media. She appeared on conservative podcasts where listeners called her the Queen of Truth, and even some neutral shows invited her to discuss the media's role. A college student, after hearing Leavitt, tweeted, "I used to think politics was dirty, but she makes me want to get involved." The post got 50,000 engagements, showing she inspired a generation. Leavitt's legacy wasn't just in defeating Kimmel, but in how she changed the national conversation. Other late-night shows, from Stephen Colbert to Jimmy Fallon, began hesitating to invite political guests, fearing a repeat of the Kimmel disaster. An Atlantic analysis wrote, "Leavitt proved entertainment media isn't invincible. One person with truth in hand can topple a comedy empire." She became an inspiration for young women with hundreds of Instagram posts, from girls writing, "Karoline Leavitt, my hero." This epic showdown on Jimmy Kimmel Live wasn't just a moment in television history, it was a turning point, a powerful reminder that truth, courage, and conviction can indeed triumph over sarcasm and manufactured narratives. Karoline Leavitt didn't just win an argument, she ignited a movement, empowering countless individuals to stand up for what they believe. And if you were captivated by this incredible story of truth prevailing, don't keep it to yourself. Like this video to show your support. Share it with friends and family who need to hear this message, and comment below with your thoughts on Karoline Leavitt's unforgettable stand. And for more stories that inspire and reveal the truth, be sure to subscribe to our channel and hit the notification bell so you never miss an update.